Shunning in gang stalking is the deliberate attempt by the United States government to socially isolate a targeted citizen. It is a practice that has been used in religions such as Jehovah's Witnesses, the Church of Scientology, among the Amish. Its purpose is to control the behavior of its members. Traditionally, it said in an article in Wikipedia on shunning, targets of shunning have included persons who have been labeled as apostates, whistleblowers, dissidents, strikebreakers, or anyone the group perceives as a threat or source of conflict. Social rejection has been established to cause psychological damage and has been categorized as torture. Do we want our government to seek to modify the behavior of citizens through shunning? Let's remember who it targeted in the past in its COINTELPRO program. Martin Luther King Jr., the Civil Rights Movement, the NAACP, the Congress for Racial Equality, the Indian Movement, Students for a Democratic Society, people who protested the Vietnam War, the National Lawyers Guild, the Women's Rights Movement. Our government even targeted Albert Einstein in its COINTELPRO program. Would the American people have sanctioned modifying the behavior of Martin Luther King Jr., members of the women's movement, Albert Einstein? What our government tried to do is what it is trying to do today with government gang stalking, to limit the influence of people it's afraid of, to discredit them in the larger community, to disempower them, to prevent social change and free and open discussion of all ideas. In an article in the Huffington Post on shunning, it said, when a person is shunned, it is because they have done something to displease someone or are perceived as distinctly different from the group and are therefore an unknown force. Shunning is thus a feature of a broader spectrum of aggressive behaviors, including accusation, sabotage, investigation, and other efforts to control or remove the person from the group. To shun a person consequently isolates them at every point when they most need support. An article in Psychology Today about shunning explains some of the causes of shunning, and among them it names jealousy, annoyance, racial or cultural bias. One important category not on that list is personality type. Our outrageous government is subjecting people to government gang stalking and shunning who belong to personality types that are a minority of the population. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is one of the foremost personality inventories we have. The estimated frequency of my type in the population, INFJ, or introverted, intuitive, feeling, judging types, is 1 to 3%. In other words, 1 in 100 people have my personality type. What does that mean? In my book, The Search for Being, I devoted a whole chapter to exploring the personality type of Al Gore, who was an INTJ, or an introverted, intuitive, thinking, judging type. His type made up 2 to 4% of the population, and I tried to show that this was one of the factors that led to his defeat in the polls. In my book, I conclude that chapter by saying, a poll conducted by a magazine found that people didn't find Al Gore to be like their brother or their father. He is one of the rarest of the 16 psychological types, and because of that, he was more likely to be misunderstood. When you have a rare personality type, when you're 1% of the population, 2 to 4% of the population, you have a different psychology than the rest of the population. And that's what the founder of personality type, Carl Jung, said. That makes it more likely that people are going to project things on you because they interpret what they see and hear from the perspective of their own personality, their own psychology. Different personality types think that each other are crazy. When I explained to a colleague that I worked with how her husband wasn't doing things to spite her, he had a different personality type and was genuinely different from her. Her words to me were, "I liked it better when I thought he was spiting me. At least then I had the hope that he would change." My type are idealists. And when I look at people who are getting a raw deal from our government, it is often the idealists. Jessalyn Raddick comes to mind. But it is the idealists, the very type our government is targeting in government gang stalking, who have made the greatest contribution to humanity. An expert on psychological type, David Kiersey, the author of Please Understand Me, tells us that idealists have been Leo Tolstoy, Upton Sinclair, Gandhi, Eleanor Roosevelt, Nelson Mandela, Thomas Paine, Buddha, Albert Schweitzer, Pope John Paul II, Jane Goodall, Mary Baker Eddy, Plato. Where would the world be if we had shunned them, tried to minimize their influence on the world, as our government did with Martin Luther King Jr., with Einstein? It's time to make sure that the FBI never again engages in activities as it did in the previous COINTELPRO program to disrupt and discredit individuals engaged in constitutionally protected activities. We have to start asking our representatives questions. Will citizens be given due process rights when anonymous tipsters make accusations against them to fusion centers? Or will that information be databased? Might they be put under surveillance as a result of what tipsters or neighbors or firemen or others say against them, even when these tipsters are carrying out personal vendettas? Who will determine the accuracy of information kept in files at fusion centers on American citizens? How can citizens correct their files? What do citizens do when inaccurate information in their files in fusion centers are shared between agencies? What recourse will an American citizen have who feels he or she is the target of a secret offensive action by a fusion center? What mechanism exists for people who believe their activities are unlawfully being monitored to redress their grievances? Why isn't there congressional oversight over fusion centers? Will fusion centers engage in monitoring and conducting surveillance of individuals or groups without credible evidence of wrongdoing or making preparation for criminal acts? Is a mechanism in place to periodically review and audit intelligence files by a neutral third party? When the ability of police to track the cars of American citizens without a warrant is abused, what recourse does the citizen have? It's about time for the reality of America to match the narrative our political leaders talk about it. Shunning in America is outrageous. Government gang stalking is outrageous. It's time for every American to scream bloody murder about it to our political leaders.